Struggling single mom falls asleep on a millionaire CEO's shoulder on a bus but wakes up shocked when he, "Could you maybe hold your kid tighter or something?" "She's taking up the whole seat," a gruff voice behind Chloe snapped, filled with irritation. Chloe flinched, her arms tightening around the small, sleeping bundle against her chest. "I'm sorry," she whispered hoarsely. She's sleeping. Before she could adjust, Emma stirred in her arms and let out a piercing wail, the kind that seemed to echo off every grimy bus window. Chloe's heart sank. The bus driver glanced in the mirror and barked, "Ma'am, can you get her quiet? People are trying to get home in peace." "I'm trying," Chloe pleaded, gently bouncing Emma. The cold from the wintry New York night still clung to her coat. Her hands trembled with exhaustion. It had been a 10-hour shift at the diner, on her feet since sunrise, and now this. "Shh, baby, please," she murmured, close to tears herself. Emma's cries only grew louder. Heads turned, phones were raised, whispers and eye rolls spread like wildfire through the bus. Then a warm, calm voice spoke beside her. "Excuse me, may I try something?" Chloe turned, startled. A man sat across the aisle, mid-30s perhaps, dressed far too well for this late-night bus. A navy wool coat, leather gloves resting on his lap, and eyes that looked kind. He gave a reassuring smile. "I've got nieces," he said. "Sometimes a new pair of arms makes all the difference." Chloe hesitated. Everything in her life had taught her to be cautious, to not rely on others. But Emma was inconsolable, and the judgment was too much. She nodded slowly, brushing a tear from her cheek. Carefully, she handed Emma over. The man took the child as though he'd done it 100 times before, tucking her gently against his chest. He bounced her slowly, whispering something Chloe couldn't hear. Miraculously, Emma's sobs faded to hiccups, and then to silence. Chloe stared in disbelief as her daughter curled up, content and safe in a stranger's arms. "She likes you," Chloe murmured. "She's warm and tired, that's all," he replied softly. Chloe's body finally gave out. Her head dipped, heavy with exhaustion, and without realizing she leaned against the man's shoulder. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply adjusted his position, then quietly removed his coat and wrapped it gently around Emma, tucking the fabric so she stayed warm, never drawing attention to himself. It was an act of kindness so simple and so rare that it didn't need words. Chloe slept. When she woke again, it was with a jolt and a panicked gasp. She blinked at the warm fabric around Emma, then looked up to see her daughter still peacefully asleep in the man's arms. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I am so sorry. I didn't mean to. I must have—" The man smiled, his voice calm as ever. "It's fine. You were exhausted. Anyone would be. If I had a child, I'd hope someone would step up when I couldn't." Chloe didn't know what to say. No one had shown her kindness like that in a long time. Emma stirred, blinking up sleepily. Her tiny voice broke the silence. "You smell like warm," she mumbled, before snuggling back into his chest. Jack chuckled. Chloe turned scarlet. "Her name is Emma," Chloe said, half smiling now. "And I'm Jack," he replied, still holding the toddler like she was made of porcelain. "Nice to meet you both." The bus began to slow at Chloe's stop. "This is us," she said reluctantly, reaching for Emma. Jack passed her gently, carefully, making sure the coat stayed wrapped around her. "Thank you," Chloe said, trying to meet his eyes. I don't know what I would have done without you tonight." Jack shrugged modestly. "You'd have figured it out. You're doing great." Chloe stepped off the bus and stood on the sidewalk, watching as it pulled away into the snowy New York night. The windows glowed dimly, and she caught one last glimpse of Jack's profile before he was gone. She held Emma closer, the coat still wrapped around the little girl, and whispered, "We won't see him again, but he was nice, huh?" Emma murmured in her sleep, and for the first time in weeks, Chloe felt a little less alone. The apartment smelled faintly of damp carpet and reheated soup. Chloe pushed the door open with one shoulder, balancing Emma against her hip, a plastic grocery bag swinging from her free hand. The door creaked shut behind her with a familiar groan. Emma whimpered softly, rubbing her eyes. Chloe set her down gently on the couch, wrapping her in a thin blanket before pulling off her own coat with a sigh. The radiator clanked to life, doing little to fight off the chill. She crossed the room to the small kitchen and stared at the near-empty fridge. She had enough for one more dinner: canned beans, a few slices of bread, half a bottle of apple juice. Payday was still 3 days away, and the landlord's note, red ink and underlined, was still stuck to the fridge. Final notice: rent due. Chloe sat at the table and dropped her face into her hands. She had been applying for second jobs all week, overnight shifts, weekend cleaning gigs, anything that would pay, but no one had called back. Emma had come down with a cough, which meant daycare had sent her home early twice already. Chloe's hours were cut again at the diner. Her body ached from fatigue, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. Still, despite the whirlwind of stress, a quiet moment surfaced in her memory. The bus, the warmth of someone else's coat around Emma, the steady rhythm of breathing beside her, the rare feeling of not being entirely alone. Jack. She didn't even know his last name. He hadn't asked for hers, but in that moment, when the world had felt too heavy, his shoulder had become her place to rest. She shook her head and sighed. Men like him did not cross into her life, not really. Not beyond one quiet, fleeting night. 2 days passed. Emma's cough worsened. Chloe gave her warm baths, rubbed her back with ointment, read her books until her voice went hoarse. She drank cold coffee in the mornings and hurried through wet sidewalks to make her shift at the diner, slipping behind the counter before the manager could yell. It was a rainy Wednesday afternoon when it happened. The bell over the door jingled. Chloe was pouring coffee into a chipped mug when she looked up and froze. Jack. He stepped inside, shaking the rain off his coat, scanning the room casually before his eyes met hers. He smiled. "Hello," he said. "Didn't expect to see you again." Chloe nearly dropped the coffee pot. She set it down carefully and wiped her hands on her apron, her heart hammering. I didn't either," she said, forcing a nervous smile. "Small city, I guess." Jack looked around, then back at her. "Busy today?" "Depends on the hour," she replied, voice shaky. "Would you like a table?" "Just coffee," he said. "Black." She nodded and grabbed a mug with fingers that trembled slightly. She poured the coffee and placed it on the counter where he had taken a seat. "Thanks," he said quietly. She nodded again, then turned away, pretending to clean a tray. Jack said nothing more. He just sat there, sipping his coffee, watching her move behind the counter. No questions, no expectations, just presence. And Chloe, though her mind whirled with questions, felt something almost like calm. Again, the morning air was brittle, the kind that clung to her skin even through the thickest coat. Chloe trudged down the wet sidewalk, her breath fogging in front of her with each step. She was early. Emma had finally slept through most of the night, and Chloe had decided to walk slower, enjoy the rare moment of peace before the grind began. But as she approached the diner, her footsteps slowed. Something hung on the front door, a paper bag. She looked around. No one was in sight. The street was mostly quiet, save for the faint honking of traffic in the distance. Carefully, she stepped up to the door and unhooked the bag from the handle. It was heavier than it looked. She opened it slowly, and her breath caught. Inside were 2 canisters of infant formula, a small bottle of children's cold syrup, a box of tissues with cartoon animals on the front, and tucked between them, a folded note. "I think Emma might need these. J." Chloe's fingers tightened around the paper. Her chest ached, unexpected, raw. She hadn't told Jack Emma was sick. She hadn't told him about the formula she could barely afford. Somehow he had noticed. And he had done this quietly, without announcement, without expectation. She carried the bag inside and set it on the counter, staring at it for a long moment. Her hands trembled. Half of her heart swelled with gratitude, the other half clenched with discomfort. Was this kindness or pity? All day the bag sat behind the counter. Chloe went through her shift as usual, taking orders, wiping tables, refilling coffees, but her mind kept drifting back to it, to Jack, to the way he had not said a word when he saw her working here. The way he had watched, not judged, but still, something twisted inside her. When her shift ended, she did not go home. She waited, and at 5:30, just as the rain began to fall again, the doorbell jingled. Jack stepped in, just as he had 2 days ago. Chloe stood behind the counter, her arms folded tightly across her chest. He noticed her posture immediate. "Hi," he said. "We need to talk," she said, her tone more tense than she meant it to be. He nodded slowly and approached the counter. "All right." She didn't soften. "I found the bag." "I hoped you would," he said. "I didn't ask for help." "No," he agreed. "You didn't." "Then why?" Her voice cracked slightly, anger and confusion fighting to surface. "Why would you do that? You don't know me." He met her gaze calmly. "Because you're raising a daughter on your own, working double shifts, and still find a way to smile at strangers. Because I saw you on that bus, holding it all together when everything was falling apart." Her throat tightened. "I'm not a charity case," she whispered. "I never said you were," Jack said gently. "Then what am I to you?" He hesitated, choosing his words with care. "You're strong. You're doing something most people would collapse under. I didn't leave that bag because I thought you were weak. I left it because I see how hard you're fighting." Chloe's shoulders dropped slightly. Her eyes stung. "I don't know how to accept things like that," she murmured. "I don't expect you to," Jack replied. "Just know it came without strings. No pity. Just respect." She looked at him for a long moment, torn between pride and something deeper. Then she nodded once, barely noticeable, and Jack, sensing she needed no more words, simply smiled and sat at his usual seat without another word. The sun peeked through the bare branches of Central Park, casting a soft, golden hue on the sidewalks, still damp from last night's rain. It was colder in the shade, but Chloe had wrapped Emma snugly in her jacket, a small knit hat covering her curls. Jack walked beside them, hands in his coat pockets, matching their pace without rush. Chloe had hesitated when he first asked. Coffee had become familiar, but a weekend walk felt like something more. Still, something in his voice, in the quiet sincerity of his eyes, had convinced her to say yes. They strolled past the playground where children laughed and chased each other, their breath fogging in the air. Emma clung to Chloe's leg for a while, shy, but eventually reached up for Jack's hand. Chloe's breath caught, but Jack simply smiled, adjusting his stride to her tiny steps. They sat on a bench, overlooking the duck pond, Emma between them with a biscuit in one hand and her ever-present stuffed rabbit, now frayed and patched, under her arm. Jack leaned back. "You always come here?" "Not often," Chloe said. "Only when I have enough energy to walk instead of taking the subway." He glanced sideways. "You seem more rested today." Chloe gave a soft laugh. "Looks can be deceiving." There was a pause. The wind rustled the trees. She looked down at Emma, who was humming to herself. Then Chloe said, "Her father left when I was 3 months pregnant, said he wasn't ready, that I ruined his life." Jack was quiet, letting her speak. "My mom was my only support, but she passed away before Emma turned 1. Cancer. Quick and cruel. After that it was just me. Working, juggling rent, diapers, everything." Her voice faltered slightly. "There were nights I'd hold Emma while she cried, and pretend I wasn't crying too." Jack's jaw tensed, but he said nothing. "I stopped trusting people," Chloe added. "Not because I wanted to, just because I had to." Emma tugged at her sleeve, and Chloe kissed the top of her head. Jack looked out at the water. "My mom raised me alone, too," he said quietly. "We had a 1-bedroom apartment in the Bronx. She worked 3 jobs. I remember nights she'd sleep on the floor so I could have the bed. She never said a word about how tired she was." Chloe turned to him slowly. "I remember she once sold her winter coat so I could go to a school dance. I didn't know until years later. She just smiled and said, 'It wasn't that cold that week.'" Chloe felt something shift inside her. Jack added, "I know what it's like to be broke. To hear people say you won't make it, to feel small because of a number in your bank account. But I also know love when I see it. And I saw it in the way you held Emma that night." Chloe's eyes welled, but she blinked quickly. "I've been lucky," Jack continued. "Things changed. I worked, I invested, And somewhere along the way, I became the guy people assume was always rich, but I never forgot where I came from, or the woman who taught me not to judge anyone by what's in their wallet. Just then, Jack stood and gestured for them to follow. "Wait here a sec." He jogged to a small vendor stand nearby. A few minutes later, he returned holding a brown paper bag. He knelt in front of Emma and pulled out a small stuffed bear, soft, with one ear slightly bent. It looked nearly identical to the worn-out rabbit she clutched. "For you," Jack said gently. Emma stared at it, wide-eyed, then slowly reached out and took it. Chloe was speechless. "How did you—" she began. "I noticed hers was falling apart," Jack said, standing again. "Found one close enough." Emma hugged the new bear tightly, not dropping the old one but nestling them together. Chloe looked at Jack, something fragile in her gaze. "No one's done anything like that for her, or for me," Jack shrugged. "Maybe it's time someone did." And in that quiet moment, Chloe felt something she had not felt in years. Trust. Not hope, not dreams, just the simple, grounding belief that maybe, just maybe, this man was not going anywhere. The afternoon light filtered through the diner's windows, casting warm streaks across the faded tiles. Chloe wiped down the counter for the 5th time, more out of habit than necessity. The lull between shifts was the only time the place ever went quiet. Emma was with the neighbor today, finally getting over her cold. For once, Chloe could breathe. The doorbell jingled softly. She looked up and saw Jack step in. He wasn't in a suit today, but a sweater and dark jeans. Casual but neat. Still somehow out of place among the chipped formica and sticky menus. He gave her a small nod and walked to his usual seat. "You're early," Chloe said, setting down her cloth. "I figured I'd catch you before the dinner crowd," Jack replied, settling in. Something about the way he sat, the thoughtful look in his eyes, made her pause. He wasn't just here for coffee today. "What's on your mind?" she asked. Jack hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a slim, folded pamphlet. He placed it on the counter between them. Chloe glanced at it. The title read, "Harbor House, a support center for single mothers." "We opened our 3rd center last month," Jack began, his voice calm but serious. "We provide housing assistance, job training, childcare support, legal aid. It's grown faster than we expected. We're at the point where we need strong leadership, people who truly understand what it means to walk through the fire." Chloe listened, unsure where this was going, but already feeling something tighten in her chest. He looked her in the eye. "I want you to join us, full-time, as a coordinator for one of our support hubs." She blinked. "Me? You," Jack said simply. "You know what this life takes. You've lived it. You're smart, compassionate, resilient. You don't just survive, you carry others with you. That's exactly what the women at Harbor House need." The room seemed to shrink around her. She stepped back slightly, her hand brushing the edge of the counter. "I don't know what to say." Jack tilted his head. "Say you'll think about it." She swallowed hard. "Why me?" "Because I believe in you," he said. "I've seen you in the toughest moments, holding your daughter, wiping her tears even when you had your own. You've been honest with me. You haven't asked for anything, and that makes you the kind of person I trust with everything." Chloe crossed her arms, suddenly feeling exposed. "I didn't ask for any of this," she said quietly. "I didn't ask for you to bring me gifts or offer me jobs." "I know," Jack said, his voice still steady. "That's why I'm offering, not giving." "There's a difference," she shook her head. "It still feels like charity, like I'm your project, your good deed of the month." His expression shifted slightly, hurt but not angry. "Chloe," he said gently, "I didn't come to you out of guilt. I didn't invite you in because I think you're helpless. I offered this because you're powerful, because I see leadership in you that you don't see in yourself yet." She opened her mouth, but he wasn't finished. "I grew up with a mother who was exactly where you are now. She worked nights, went without meals so I could eat, smiled when she was breaking inside. And I saw the world judge her, talk down to her, but she never let it stop her." He leaned forward, voice quiet but intense. "I remember watching her sleep on the floor so I could have the bed. She never told me we were poor. She just lived with love." She taught me what strength looks like. And when I saw you on that bus, tired, carrying your child, still finding the strength to smile, I saw her." Chloe felt her throat tighten. Her fingers gripped the edge of the counter. "I'm not trying to save you," Jack said. "I'm asking you to join me, not because you need me, but because I need someone like you." The words landed deep. For a moment, Chloe said nothing. Her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. Her heart told her to say yes, but her scars whispered no. I can't," she said finally, voice quiet. Jack didn't push. He only nodded. "I understand." She looked at him, her eyes full of something between apology and fear. "I'm just not ready. I don't know if I can be who you think I am." Jack smiled softly. "You already are." Later that night, Chloe walked home slowly, under the dim glow of streetlights. Emma's hand was wrapped around 2 fingers, swinging gently. The air was crisp, the city buzzing faintly in the distance. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but somewhere inside, a part of her had begun to wonder. What if she said yes? The rain had been falling non-stop since dusk. Cold, relentless sheets of it drummed against the windows of Chloe's small apartment, blurring the city lights outside. Inside, the air was heavy with worry. Emma lay on the couch, cheeks flushed, her small body burning with fever. Chloe sat beside her, a damp washcloth in one hand, the phone in the other. The urgent care clinic had closed early due to flooding. The pharmacy said the delivery would take hours. Emma whimpered, her breath shallow. Chloe's heart squeezed with helplessness. She tried calling her neighbor. No answer. She called her manager, asking to miss the morning shift. They hung up on her. Then, without thinking, she called Jack. He answered on the first ring. "Emma's really sick," Chloe said, her voice breaking. "She's burning up. I'm coming," Jack said, cutting her off gently. "Stay with her. I'm on my way." 15 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Chloe opened it to find Jack, soaked from the rain, holding a bag of medicine in one hand and a small pot in the other. "I stopped by the late-night pharmacy," he said, stepping inside and pulling off his coat. "Got the fever reducer, electrolyte packets, and some ginger rice porridge I asked them to heat up for her." Chloe stared at him, stunned. You really came?" He looked at her and gave a small, almost teasing smile. "Of course I came." He placed everything on the table, then knelt beside Emma. "Hi, sweetheart," he whispered, brushing her damp curls from her face. "Rough night, huh?" Emma whimpered again. "Let's try this medicine," Jack said gently. "Then I'll tell you the best story you've ever heard." Chloe sat in silence as Jack cradled Emma in his lap, coaxing her to drink the medicine with soft words and patience. When Emma's eyelids began to droop, he pulled out one of her storybooks and read, his voice calm and warm, steady as rain outside. Chloe couldn't look away. When Emma finally fell asleep, her breathing easing into soft, even rhythms, Jack set her gently down and covered her with a blanket. Then he turned to the stove and reheated the porridge. "Let her eat in the morning if she's up for it," he said. Chloe stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself. "You didn't have to come," she whispered. "It's the middle of the night." Jack shrugged, ladling the porridge into a bowl. "That's when people need someone the most." Chloe stepped forward, her voice shaking. "I don't know how to do this. Be cared for." Jack turned, his eyes meeting hers. "All my life," she said, "people have left. Emma's dad, my mom, friends. Every time I needed someone, they disappeared, so I just stopped expecting anything. It hurts less that way." Tears rolled down her cheeks before she could stop them. Jack crossed the room slowly, placed a hand on her arm. "You don't have to do this alone anymore," he said quietly. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know." Suddenly a sleepy voice piped up from the couch. "Mommy?" Chloe rushed over. "Yes, baby, I'm right here." Emma reached out, but instead of grabbing Chloe, she wrapped her little arms around Jack's neck as he knelt beside them. "If you were a pillow," she mumbled, her voice thick with sleep, "I'd never want to let go." Jack laughed softly and pulled her close. Then, still holding Emma gently, he looked up at Chloe. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "You and Emma, you're home now. My home." Chloe stared at him, tears silently falling. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away, and in that moment, quiet, messy, real, he leaned forward and kissed her. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't dramatic, it was gentle, sure, and filled with every unsaid word between them. When they pulled apart, Chloe rested her forehead against his, her fingers threading through his. "I don't know how this will work," she whispered. Jack smiled. "Then let's figure it out. Together." Outside, the rain began to ease. Inside, something new had begun, soft and certain, like love that grows slowly but stays. Spring crept into the city slowly, softening the sharp winds and coaxing pale blossoms from the stubborn branches. For the first time in years, Chloe greeted the season with something like hope. She had said yes. Yes to the job. Yes to the cause. Yes to something bigger than survival. At Harbor House, she found herself surrounded by women who reminded her of her past self, young, tired, afraid. And yet, every day she stood before them not as a broken version of herself, but as proof that healing was possible. She helped arrange daycare, trained volunteers, ran workshops on budgeting and single-parent resources. Her days were long and often messy, but they mattered. She came home each night to Emma, who now ran into Jack's arms as naturally as her own. Together, Chloe and Jack launched a new project, an affordable housing development tailored specifically for single mothers, complete with on-site childcare, support staff, and safe outdoor space for children. One afternoon, as they toured the construction site with blueprints in hand and hard hats on their heads, Chloe paused at a sign being painted near the gate. She squinted. "Wait, is that what I think it is?" Jack smiled, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly. The sign read, "Emma's Place, a new beginning for every mother and child." Chloe's throat tightened. She touched the painted wood gently. "For her?" she whispered. "For both of you," Jack said. "But mostly for her, because she's what gave you your strength, and you gave it to me." Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she blinked them away, overwhelmed. Weeks passed. The building neared completion. Chloe flourished in her role, her confidence growing with every decision she made. Jack was always beside her, not to lead but to support, to trust her judgment, to believe in her when her own faith wavered. Then one evening, while organizing documents at the office, Chloe accidentally opened an email left on Jack's screen. It was from an international investment firm, offering him a multi-million-dollar contract to return as CEO of a tech conglomerate in London, a contract he had declined. The date was from 3 months ago. Chloe froze. Later that night, as they walked home together beneath the soft glow of street lamps, she could not keep it in. "You turned down that job," she said quietly. Jack glanced at her, then nodded. "I did. It was everything, money, power, prestige." "I know." She stopped walking, facing him. "Why?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "Because I already have everything I want." Chloe's voice cracked. "You gave up all that for me?" Jack stepped closer. "Not for you, because of you. You showed me what matters. You reminded me that the best investment I could ever make is in people, in home, in love." He cupped her face gently. "Because you, Chloe, you are everything." And in the soft silence that followed, she wrapped her arms around him, knowing, finally, that this love wasn't something she had stumbled into by accident. It was the love she had earned. The love that had found her right when she needed it most. The new Harbor House stood tall and bright beneath the golden afternoon sun, its fresh coat of paint gleaming, windows wide open to let in the early summer breeze. Outside, a crowd gathered under a white canopy tent, filled with mothers, children, volunteers, and supporters, each face lit with hope. Chloe stood at the podium, her hair caught gently in the wind, her voice clear and warm as she spoke into the microphone. "I used to believe I was invisible," she began, her eyes scanning the crowd. "I used to think that because life had been hard, because I was a single mom scraping by, I didn't have value, that I had to survive in the shadows." She paused, glancing down at the front row, where Jack sat with Emma in his lap. The little girl waved when their eyes met, making Chloe smile. "But then someone reminded me that strength is not silence. that pain does not mean weakness, that motherhood is not a limitation, it's a gift. Applause rippled through the audience. I'm standing here today not as someone who was rescued, but as someone who was reminded of her worth. I now know I have value, and I promise to spend the rest of my life helping others see their own. As the applause grew, Chloe stepped back, blinking away tears. She turned to leave the stage, when Jack stood and walked forward. He took her hand and turned to the crowd. "Before you all go," he said with a nervous laugh, "there's something I need to ask." He dropped to one knee. Gasps and delighted cheers erupted around them. Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple, elegant ring. His voice was steady, but his eyes were filled with emotion. "Chloe, you gave me more than love. You gave me purpose. You gave me Emma. You gave me a future I didn't know I was missing." He looked up at her with a softness that made the world seem to disappear. "You gave me hope, and you gave me a family. Will you marry me?" Chloe's hand flew to her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered, nodding. "Yes, Jack, of course." The crowd erupted into cheers as he slid the ring onto her finger and pulled her into an embrace. Emma ran up and wrapped her arms around both of them, squealing, "Now we're a forever family." A few weeks later, they held a small wedding in the very park where Jack had once given Emma her first teddy bear. White chairs lined the green grass, soft music floated on the air, and Chloe wore a simple lace dress that made her glow like morning sunlight. Emma walked ahead of her, proudly scattering petals in a white dress with a pink sash, holding the bouquet as if it were made of gold. Jack stood at the altar with tears already in his eyes. When Chloe reached him, they held hands and whispered their vows, not needing to raise their voices. Their love spoke loudly enough. They kissed to cheers and clapping, and as the sun dipped lower, they wandered into the open field just beyond the ceremony. Chloe, Jack, and Emma sat down on a small plaid blanket beneath a tree. The sky above was painted in streaks of amber, pink, and gold. Jack wrapped his arm around Chloe. Emma curled up between them, her head resting on Chloe's lap. "Do you think sunsets ever get tired?" Emma asked sleepily. Chloe laughed softly. "No, baby. They're just taking turns with the moon." Jack squeezed Chloe's hand, and as the sky grew dim and fireflies began to appear, the three of them sat there, shoulder to shoulder, heart to heart, watching the day end and a new one begin. Together, always. Thank you for watching this soul-stirring journey of love, resilience, and second chances. If Chloe and Jack's story touched your heart, reminded you of the quiet strength in everyday people, or gave you hope for your own journey, please don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little light, and most importantly, subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories. Here we tell the kind of stories that heal hearts, restore faith, and remind us all that kindness, love, and courage still exist, even in the most unexpected places. Until next time, keep believing in the beauty of second chances.